The racial and economic disparities in this country have only been widened by the coronavirus and amplified by the most recent acts of injustice. That's why Bank of America has committed $1 billion over 4 years to address critical gaps in affordable housing, access to healthcare, employment and job skills, and the resources small businesses need to succeed. We can do more to further advance racial equality and economic opportunity for all.
Hello, all. Thank you again, Bank of America, for your generous sponsorship. My name is Joe Nadell. I'm the VP of Finance for Colonial Parking. I am also currently co-chair of the Small Business Alliance, as well as a member of the Superstars and Business Selection Committee. I hope you guys have been enjoying the program so far. I know I have, and I'm happy you're here for anticipated keynote speech with Elisa Morkaitis. Well, I know we'd all like to be together for this event. I think I'd like to thank the Superstars in Business Committee, as well as the staff at the Chamber for the tremendous job that they've done to make this a special event, regardless of the circumstances. And now I'd like to take this time to introduce our keynote speaker, Elisa Morkaitis. Elisa is the founder and owner of Brouhaha, an independent chain of coffee houses headquartered here in Wilmington, Delaware. Elisa opened her first store in 1993 after an inspirational trip abroad. Today, Brouhaha has grown to 10 coffee houses and has received numerous awards, including being voted #1 coffee shop in Delaware by Food and Wine magazine, as well as best coffee in Delaware for 26 years in a row by the readers of Delaware Today. I'm sure that last bit comes no surprise to those of us that have had the pleasure to visit a Brouhaha cafe to taste the coffee and soak in the atmosphere. Welcome, Elisa, and thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today to talk about your experience as a small business owner. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe, and thanks to the entire Delaware State Chamber for inviting me to speak at this really inspiring event. I'm excited to be here to celebrate this special day for our community and our winners. You know, when I initially wrote this speech, I was going to start the way I start many of my talks. I was going to talk about how 27 years ago I went to Italy and fell in love with the coffee, and about how I spent hours hanging out at the espresso cafes, drinking in the smell of freshly ground coffee, listening to the whooshing sound of the steaming pitcher, and watching the barista steam milk into a white liquid chromium finish. And the taste, oh my gosh, the coffee was beyond anything I'd ever had, bar none. It was smooth and rich with just that right touch of sweetness. And I especially loved it when the baristas created these magical designs in the coffee, like hearts or flowers, and even swans. And I remember thinking to myself, why can't they make coffee like this in Wilmington? And for the first time, I knew what I really wanted to do with my life. But I'm not going to dwell on that story because we're in the midst of a pandemic that's wreaked havoc on our lives. And my usual speech just doesn't seem to fit. Because I know what many of you must be experiencing in these past months. The sleepless nights, trying the best to take care of your employees and your customers and your families. And on top of that, maybe your business has been hard hit as well, and you're struggling to survive. But I also don't want to dwell on the difficulties we've experienced battling this virus. No, today I'd prefer to look forward and talk about what I've learned and how we can focus on the positive things to make us stronger once we beat this thing. And we will beat this thing. Here's what I've learned. First, I've learned the importance of gratitude. You know, sometimes when things are going great, people don't take the time to be grateful. And I know I've been guilty of that. But this pandemic has forced me to dig deep and realize how lucky I am. I mean, how many people get the chance to live out their dreams? I certainly wasn't living out my dreams when I was working as a bench chemist or an internal auditor. But after years of toiling at various boring jobs, or at least jobs that I found boring, I was finally able to stop and ask myself a simple question. What do I really like doing? And come up with a simple answer. Why, I hang out at coffee shops, of course, and build a company that both made money and gave me a chance to do something I loved. 27 years ago when I started Brouhaha, I never imagined that we would grow to 10 cafes and become a Delaware institution. And I never imagined that we'd win Best Coffee in Delaware for 26 years in a row. Or that we'd also open up a coffee roasting business that ships coffee all over the country. And for that, I'm truly grateful. Second, I've learned that it really does take a village. And boy, do I have a strong village supporting me. I'm grateful to have made so many friends in this community, and I can't count how many times I've received encouragement from the Delaware business community. I love Delaware, and I'm grateful that Delaware has loved me back. And I can't tell you how much that means to me. You see, when I was growing up in Wilmington, I was painfully shy. I was that girl in junior high who sat alone in the cafeteria every day for 2 years, reading books and hoping someone would sit down at my table, and at the same time, kind of dreading it. Well, I'm not so shy anymore, and I don't dread meeting and talking to people who come into my cafes, even the ones, and maybe especially the ones who have complaints and suggestions for improvement, because I know you have my back, and I'll always have yours. Above all, I'm grateful for my employees, because I didn't build this business by myself, and nobody does. I build it with the help of so many talented and passionate people who've worked alongside of me every step of the way to forge Brujah into something so much larger than myself and my original dream. The third and a very important thing I've learned is that failure is not necessarily a bad thing, which is good because I have failed a few times. My team and I have faced down many obstacles in these years. We were hit hard by 9/11 and the Great Recession and other obstacles that were outside of our control. But I have to say the hardest failures to face up to are the self-inflicted wounds. When you screw up and not only lose a lot of money, but you have to face your employees and yourself and admit that you made a mistake. And who likes to do that? The boxer Mike Tyson once said that everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Well, I've had many plans, but not every one of them worked out. And so I got punched in the face a few times. Like back in the late 90s, I launched a plan to expand into Pennsylvania, and we expanded too quickly and it nearly cost us the business. But we survived. And 6 years ago, I got really excited about pressed juice and was convinced it was the next big thing. I opened my juice bar with a bang and 6 months later closed it with a thud and a lot less cash in the bank. And we survived that too. In fact, shortly after the juice bar fiasco, we went on to exciting new expansions of our cafes in Trolley Square and Greenville, as well as also creating a whole new roasting business, Brandywine Coffee Roasters, which is growing by leaps and bounds. One good thing about being in business for yourself is that if you do it for any length of time, you eventually figure out that the path to success is not a straight line that goes up and just keeps rising. No, for most of us, the path to success is more of a zigzag line with ups and downs. You start out and you have a little success and you think, baby, you're going to keep on flying. And then you get punched in the face and you go down. And when you're lying on the ground feeling defeated, you ask yourself, how are we going to survive this? And you have absolutely no idea. But somehow, some force greater than yourself helps you get off the ground. And with a courage you never knew you had, you stand up and you fight and you overcome. And then you go on to have a little more success again and you're thinking you're on fire. And then you get punched in the face again. This time though, you're not as afraid as before and you get back up a little quicker. And once again, you overcome. And then you come to the moment when you're facing a once-in-a-century pandemic, one that arrives out of the blue in March and forces you to close all your cafes and go into lockdown. And once again, you ask yourself, how are we going to survive this? But then you remember, this isn't the first time you asked yourself that question. This isn't your first rodeo. It's like your 20th rodeo. And you remember that you and your team have all the courage you need to fight this because you've walked through fire before and you know how to fight and how to emerge from the fire even stronger. Winston Churchill once said that success is not final and failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. And that's what we do. We continue. I know that my story is just one of many small business stories in this community. And I don't know all of your stories, but I do know one thing. You all have that courage also, because you wouldn't be here if you didn't. You all have taken a chance and followed your dream. And along the way, I assume you've had to deal with failure. You've had to pick yourself up and find that courage to continue. I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know how this latest installment of our story will turn out. But I have faith that we will be okay. because we're all in this together. And together we continue and we overcome. And to help us along, we're so lucky to have organizations like the Delaware State Chamber, which are so vital to our community because they are there for us when we need community most. They bring us together, support us, and recognize the achievements of its members. Members like our winners today, who took a flyer and created a business out of whole cloth, and in so doing, added so much value to our community. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for your support and your friendship over the years. It is my honor to be here with you. Good luck to each of you, and fly high.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. That was, I really appreciate the positive tone of your speech, considering the uncertain times we have, and I found it very inspirational. So thank you again, and what a
Thank
great
you.
story.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Do you have, I have a few questions here from
Sure.
some attendees. But first, I'd like to start with a question of my own that my daughter's asked me to ask you.
Yes.
What obstacles have you overcome or had to overcome, or once in starting your business, or once it was established as a female business owner?
Okay, well, yeah, that's a great question. Basically, before I started Brouhaha, I worked in the corporate world for more than a decade. And in doing so, I came to understand two things. One, that I was a fish out of water. And two, that a woman trying to climb the corporate ladder in the 1980s, as I did, needed to work twice as hard to get half as far. For example, I loved wearing dresses, but I was told to wear, you know, those power suits with the padded shoulders and those little bow ties. And I was told to act more professional, more like a man would act. And I was even told that I needed to lose weight. And that was when I began to dream about having my own business, because I felt like then, you know, whether I was successful or not was dependent on my own efforts, as opposed to how I played the game. Now, when I started, you know, when I had the revelation about Brouhaha, you know, I had quite a lot of doubters at the time. I know that people didn't take me that seriously. Vendors and lawyers stood me up. They kind of dismissed me. And after that kind of treatment, I didn't even bother going to the bank and trying to get a loan. I just maxed out my credit cards. And even, you know, friends and neighbors, they were well-meaning, but, you know, we'd go to parties and people would come up to my husband and say, hey, how does it feel to start a coffee business and write a business plan? And, but, you know, and after Brouhaha even got a little bit of success, there was still, you know, those moments when people would show up at the door and I'd get that looking over my shoulder move and they'd ask, like, where's the boss? Where's the owner? But having said all of this, you know, I've always felt the support of this community at large and the business community, like my bankers, my accountants, Wisma Giordano, who are winners tonight, I know, and WISFIS was with me every step of the way through all the highs and lows. I couldn't have asked for more support in so many ways. So times have changed. I feel, you know, finally no one asks, you know, who the owner is, which is nice, I guess. But, you know, what's more important is getting to do my own thing. So it's all
Great.
good. All your daughters, it's
Great.
all good.
I couldn't imagine starting a business, let alone some of the obstacles that I probably wouldn't have had to face during that time. So that's great.
Well, thank you.
Another question I've got here. Given that Brouhaha is not only a place for great coffee, but also a place to socialize.
Yeah.
What does a Brouhaha look like post-COVID?
Well, I'm hoping that post-COVID, it looks like it did before, you know, because people do need to socialize. They need to feel that sense of community. And the whole reason you know, one of the big reasons I created this business beyond coffee was I wanted to create that community center, those warm, welcoming, safe spaces for people to be. So I cannot wait until we can allow people fully to come back in and have that connection that my staff has always had with the customers and vice versa. And we'll provide that, and that just is never going to change. So
good. I like to hear. I like the positive attitude. I can't wait either.
Yeah, thank you.
the COVID-19 pandemic has changed workplace procedures, interactions, which sometimes can have a lasting effect on the culture and
Yeah,
company morale.
right.
From your position, what steps have you taken to address this concern and revitalize that culture and morale?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that. I do, interestingly, in many ways, I feel our morale and culture have actually strengthened during this pandemic, and it's been a challenge because, of course, when we went into lockdown, we had to furlough almost everyone. But we kept in touch with everybody, and as we slowly reopened the cafes, we kept in touch. We took care of them as best as we could. We communicated with them before we opened the cafes, and first and foremost, we provided a safe work environment. Like, that was what we focused on. Not only a safe working environment, but making sure so that people didn't get sick. So they didn't get sick, but that they trusted that we were looking out for them and their health and making that a priority. Same with customers, but we wanted to have that trust. And one of the things that my team, my administrative team, my managers, they've come up through the trenches. They started out as counter crew and baristas, almost all of them. And so they know how to talk to people. They wouldn't ask their team to do anything that they weren't willing to do. And that's how we all feel. We would never ask someone to, who's working in the trenches to do something that we didn't feel comfortable with ourselves, which is why we haven't, we're only doing takeout and curbside right now. And we want to make sure we check in with them to make sure they're feeling safe. And, as a result, we had people come back to work for us who could have made more on unemployment. But they wanted to come back. And so I feel good about it. And hopefully that continues. That's
Great. I appreciate the fact that you've got a business here that's built on socialization, and you're kind of holding off on that for the betterment of the community. I think we all appreciate that. Thank you. Now, we talked about your business, the culture. I have a question for you. How do you control stress during these times?
Well, I love walking. And for me, taking walks in nature at state parks is the best mood elevator ever. That's when I get my revelations, and it has helped a great deal. I've worn out a couple pairs of shoes walking. It's been great. And the other thing that I started doing, and relatively recently, was I started meditating. And I found that, I always sort of thought, oh, I'm going to meditate one day, but COVID gave me a chance to really go kind of do a deep dive. And I found out that breathing really does calm you down. It's so true. And I guess last but not least is, I would say, ice cream. Lots of Ben & Jerry's and Jenny's, which is a really nice, high-fat, delicious quality ice cream. That has helped quite a bit too.
I can appreciate that for sure. I have a question here. You touched on it during your speech, but can you talk a little bit more about the new roasting business?
Sure. Well, we started 5 years ago, and several people on my team, very creative people, we had a dream. We wanted to bring this. I've always been, I thought about roasting since the beginning, but I wanted to get the cafes operating. That's a hard business to operate, and get that down before we embarked on a completely separate business. But we had wanted to bring this high quality coffee to the Brandywine Valley because we wanted it to represent the Brandywine Valley, which we love. I mean, we wanted our coffee to not only sort of be something that could be sold across the country, but we wanted to reflect our culture in the Brandywine Valley, industry and the beauty and the art, the culture of art. So we put together a brand that focuses heavily on all of those things, especially the art. The bags are hand designed. They're silk screened using a technology that's was from the early 19th century. I'm sorry, the early 20th century. So every bag is hand silk screened, and so BCR ends up roasting coffee fresh for not just the Bruja cafes, but also for cafes across the country and online customers and wholesale and online. And I guess that's it, Bruja cafes and grocery stores. That's right. Whole Foods markets. So we've been, it's interesting. The pandemic has hit Bruja hard, I'll have to admit, but we found our business starting to really go on fire after the pandemic, because a lot of people are brewing coffee at home. And so that was a bit of a surprise, a happy one, actually. But it's been a lot of fun doing this
Great.
business. Totally
Good. I
separate.
got one last quick question here.
Sure.
This is from one of our attendees. She says you've been so welcoming of artists in your cafes and wanted to let you know how much that's appreciated.
Oh,
The question is, how did you develop your appreciation for art?
oh gosh. I don't know how I developed it. I guess I just have always loved art. I have always loved art, and all the arts. I think one of the reasons, and this isn't really art, but we put a lot of art in our cafes, but I love decorating. And to me, that's an art as well. One that I have no formal background in. I'm more of a, what do you call it? I just like to do it. But, I don't know. Obviously being with all of these wonderful artists over the years, because artists are naturally gravitating to being in coffee shops.
Mhm.
And that has given me a lot of my employees have taken me to art museums, and so they've showed me the way as well.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for your time, Elisa. I really enjoyed our back and forth. I enjoyed
Me too.
your speech.
Me too.
And again, I just thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. Well, I hope to meet you in person one day. I look
hope
forward to that.
soon. Hopefully soon, over a cup of coffee.
Yes. Well, good idea.
Okay. I know the scavenger hunt is probably the most intense competitions going on right now around here. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that the next code is opportunity. As in, this is my opportunity to thank everyone for attending the 2020 Superstars in Business virtual event. Please make sure that you join the speed networking event next and stay around for the viewing of the Superstars winter productions at 1 p.m. Thank you, everyone.